Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of the Unnamed Sports Show. Bonus because it's not Thursday at 3 p.m. and bonus because my guest is Canadian skeleton racer Grace Dafoe. So just back home from training from the Whistler Sliding Center, we'll be talking to Grace about the sport and how she got into it. So before we get into things, of course, we have some housekeeping to do. Make sure you hit that like button. It doesn't hurt you. I promise. You can click it and nothing's going to happen. Go ahead and make sure to comment along with the show. We talk sports. Capitalize we. I guess we do talk sports a lot here at Sports Talkland. So we love to hear what you think and we want to interact with you. So also, if you're really, really passionate about things, make sure you hit that big blue join button. My producer Lee has a great video out there that's just obliterated any of our show numbers. Actually, it's basically just a hair commercial where he tries to get you to hit the big blue button. So watch that, as I do not nearly do it enough justice. Okay, so I have my show plugged, I have my guest plugged, and I have my company plugged. So if I don't keep things under a certain time, I'm going to hear about it from the Crown Prince. So without further ado, here's my chat with Grace Dafoe. So I'm joined now on the Unnamed Sports Show by Canadian skeleton racer Grace Dafoe. Grace, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So I know you just got back home from training there in Whistler. How is your family doing? Everyone staying safe and healthy?
Yeah, everyone's staying safe and healthy. I spent 6 weeks to start up my season in Whistler. Unfortunately, BC went into lockdown while I was there, so we couldn't really see anyone outside of our team bubble per se, except going to the grocery store. And then now I'm home, but I can't see anyone really either too for my family because Alberta just went into lockdown actually as of tomorrow. So it's a little bit bittersweet to be home, but I live with my partner and with my dog, so at least I get to see them, and it's always nice to sleep in my own bed.
That's good. Good to hear. So I'm really excited to have you on today because I want to get into a lot of things, but I want to start kind of way back before you got into skeleton. It seems like you were always big into sports. Let's kind of start with your figure skating career. You seem to get to kind of a very high level for the age.
I don't know. So I mean, my love of sports just goes back to, I grew up in a lake community in Calgary, so we kind of had like a man-made lake that you could swim in the summer, and we had a membership, and then you could skate on it in the winter. So pretty much, like, I remember getting skates strapped to me there when I was 2 and learning to skate, and from there then I got into can skate just to learn how to skate. My older brother was a hockey player, so I think that part, like, my dad was active. It was natural, and I was just like, whatever, sports will come. And then, my mom just says, like, from the moment I started skating, like, they didn't push me to keep going. They just wanted me to learn to skate. Mm-hmm. But then I just like loved it so much. And everyone just seemed to say, like, yeah, just keep going. And, I skated for 14 years, and I would say, I landed all my double jumps, was working on triples. If you're a figure skater, I have my triple gold. I'm missing one of the golds, my gold dance, but not necessarily a competitive, like, high level, just traveling Western Canada to little community competitions. But what I really got out of it was just like the fun, and I still have a ton of friends that I knew from my skating days, and just like the work ethic of committing to being an athlete. And while I was going through, junior high and high school, I was trying to be competitive. I just never quite got the triple jumps going. But like at that same time though, I've always loved the Olympics. And I remember in 2002, the teacher rolling in the TV cart, and we watched the women's hockey. And I just remember, like, to me, that the Olympics have always just been there. And I remember moments from every Olympic, mostly winter, but every winter Olympic cycle. And so, the transition into skeleton just kind of stems from my love of the Olympics.
So I wanted to touch on the Olympics here. Wanted to bring up the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver and Whistler, because that kind of seemed like it was a big spark in your skeleton career.
Yeah, it was a big spark for just opening my eyes in general to what other sports were out there. I was around 15 or 16 at the time, and I remember when Vancouver was awarded the Olympics, and I was like trying to convince my parents we should go as a 10-year-old, and like, let's go to the Olympics and watch. And of course we didn't, but I recorded I would say on my TV, like every waking hour. And I would, after school in the morning, I would watch like the stuff the morning show, the recap with Jay Onright. I remember watching, he was hilarious. And then, and it just kind of opened my eyes to what else was out there. And I mean, I knew at that point, like I wasn't going to be a competitive figure skater, like at that national team level, at that Olympic level. But I was still doing it for fun. But I think that did spark a little bit of the thought of what else is out there. What can I do? And, I did entertain speed skating briefly, but it just didn't seem like the right fit. Track cycling, I hate bikes. That wasn't for Vancouver 2010, but that was an option that they were like, I grew about 6 inches right around that time in Vancouver 2010. So I had been a 5 foot tall figure skater, and suddenly I was 5'7" and muscular. And that's not necessarily the aesthetic that figure skating lends itself to. So, I was also trying to find something that fit what I thought my body type was. So, it definitely sparked the interest. And I remember watching the bobsled and the skeleton, and John Montgomery, his famous walk through the medal to the medal ceremony with the jug of beer.
It's a walk of fame. You can call it a walk of fame. It definitely was.
It definitely is. It changed his life forever as well. And, now he's hosted The Amazing Race and all that. But, it just kind of sparked that thought of like what else was out there. And then the next couple of years after that was kind of when I got into skeleton, and I actually went to a Triad event in January 2012, and John Montgomery was there. Which was kind of a cool full circle moment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Discover Skeleton event.
Yeah, so normally it was kind of like it was put on by the Canadian Olympic Development Association, or WinSport, up in COP before the track closed up here. And it basically, they had every sport at COP was free. It was put on by the Sportars. You could come try it. It wasn't the height that they normally run tour sessions from. It was like a way lower start to be safe. They're giving us very basic safety instruction, and then the helmet, and they stick you on the sled and they say, please do nothing. If you do something, you will probably put yourself in more danger than if you just lay there like a sack of potatoes. It feels like a washing machine. I wasn't convinced I loved it, but it sparked kind of like, it did intrigue me. So about 8 months after that, over the summer, I had been in contact with the Alberta Skeleton Association, the provincial org out here in Calgary. And then there's also the provincial organization out in BC, the BC BSA. But I've been, obviously, because I'm in Calgary, I had been in contact with them. And I took the full, learn to slide 3-day course about 8 months later, and then found myself kind of invited to be on the provincial development team, which, it's not like there's cuts, but they're like, you're 18. It's a more male dominated sport. I would say there's less female competitors as well. So they were kind of like, you check all the boxes, you're interested, come try it.
Well, so many sports nowadays seem like they're male dominated, and you're doing actually some great stuff to hopefully combat that. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So I'm joined now by Grace Dafoe here on the Unnamed Sports Show. Grace, if you kind of just talk about what came next in your racing career, and for people who may not be familiar, like what's involved with training, and what are some of the things that skeleton athletes focus on?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. And what we focus on is any sort of sport that lends itself to power and speed is kind of more so what you can transform yourself into a skeleton athlete. So, a lot of figure skating wasn't necessarily an obvious choice for them identifying athletes, but because of the explosiveness to jump, I knew I had it, and I had ran track in high school as well. So I knew I wasn't completely out to lunch, and that I could push myself in that direction. A lot of rugby athletes as well, just anyone strong and powerful, but also quick, is what they look for. But you can really hone in, if you're training for another sport, you can really hone in then on those specific. It's actually pretty easy to train for. Run straight forward linear for 5 seconds. You're in this awkward bent over position, but then you get on your sled, and then the driving's a whole nother area that you don't train as much for physically. You just train to withstand the length of the season. And so your body doesn't break down through the G-forces, but we do a lot of weightlifting, like power cleans and Olympic lifts, not super heavy, but dynamic and quick. And then a lot of, I basically had to learn to sprint. I ran one season of track in high school, but my gosh, that doesn't compare to like training with basically an Olympic level track coach here, who he worked for Athletics Canada, is my sprint coach now. And I basically had to learn to run a 30-45 sprint as fast as I can we have a national team standard in order to be considered on the national team. So I ran that a few years ago, and that's kind of like a gate that goes up, and then you can kind of enter the next. But that doesn't mean that you can't do skeleton for fun or recreationally and like learn to drive the sled while you're also learning all that. That's what I did, and I found it really helped. In terms of my first couple of years, the length of time you spend learning is obviously dependent. Some people come in, they already have that speed, they already have that track, so they kind of get a little bit fast tracked through the system. I didn't necessarily have that. I don't want to say it's a luxury, but you kind of get instant support because you're like identified. And I didn't have that. But I was going to university in Mount Royal, and I have a degree in health and physical education. So I was kind of learning about athlete development and transferability of skills between sports. And I kind of got to live that while I was learning this new sport. And then in my second or third year of university, I was selected to move into North America's Cup. So we have 2 development level circuits that you kind of, after you've learned and you're like certified to be safe to slide at your home track, you start to earn these development level races. So we have a North American circuit. NORAMs is what we call, generally that's where we would start out in North America. There's a Europa Cup circuit, which is where the Europeans generally start out. And then once you kind of get to the next level, you find that we swap continents, and you're kind of going over to compete against the Europeans. And then there's a World Cup B, I call it. It's Intercontinental Cup. And that kind of prepares you for that top level. That obviously goes intercontinental. You go everywhere. And then, then we have that top level World Cup, which is people that are obviously going to be vying for the next Olympic Games. We have certain quotas. So as a big nation, Canada has 2 spots at the World Cup, 2 spots at Intercontinental Cup, 2 spots Europa Cup, and 4 spots on North America's Cup. So within that, I don't get to choose. Oh, I think I'm World Cup quality. I don't just get to do that. We then race off within Canada, which is what I was just doing out in Whistler. Even though we're not competing the first half, we still have to race off against our teammates to set the team for the next few months. And obviously that's always fluid. But yeah, that's kind of how skeleton works in a sense. And, not a lot of people know. They're like, oh, you guys just lay there, and they don't know how we get into it. But pretty much anyone in Canada can get into it if you can get yourself to Whistler or to Calgary.
So if I have my research correct, your first race on the North American Race Circuit was November 9th, 2014. Am I right?
You know more than me. I know it was 2014. Okay. So sorry. Yeah, I kind of stopped. I got distracted by the explaining the
no worries.
Circuit. But yeah, so after Sochi 2014 Olympics, I'd been sliding recreationally for 2 years in Calgary, and just having fun and going to university and working, and it kind of caught me by surprise. A lot of people retired from our national team. So obviously that creates like this effect. People move up in the national team, and what happens if there's no national team athletes to fill those spots? They then offer it to the provincial sport organizations. So then they went to our provincial sport organization, and they're like, hey, we have 2 spots for females at this race coming up in Park City. Who send us the names, and we'll get it all organized. And so I had a few weeks notice that was happening, and I'm in university at the time too, and right around midterm season. Thankfully it fell over like the Remembrance Day break, so I kind of only missed a few days of class, but suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I'm competing. Like I was standing on the start line that week. I mean, learning a new track is hard, but I remember standing on the start line and just being like, I've dreamt of representing Canada like my entire life. I never thought it would be in skeleton in Park City, but I knew it was. I knew that I wanted to do it, and it was an emotional moment for sure. And I kind of was like, I can retire now. My life's dream.
Check. Yep.
So yeah, and things just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, it's been up and down, but that was kind of how I started started racing, and I then came back to Calgary right after that and got to race at home for the first time ever. And I had friends and family come out, and I actually ended up on the podium. I was, I think, fourth and then third. I can't remember, but that too, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I get to be on the podium. And one of my teammates won the race, so I got to be on the podium and hear "Oh Canada." I wasn't on the top, but second best, my teammate had won. So it was an exciting kind of whirlwind, that first 6 months of racing, being like, wait, how did I end up here?
I was going to ask if you could, if there was like a better scenario for your first podium.
I mean, I think the better scenario would have been in Park City, my first race ever.
That's true.
But I didn't really see it as something that could happen. Skeleton's very much all about home track advantage, and because every course is different. So I knew that in Calgary, like, it was nice. I got to sleep in my own bed and kind of, I knew the way up to the track. Every track has its own thing, and it's, mentally as well, you need to know what to expect. And I remember also, I think we did the podium ceremonies in Calgary, and I had an anatomy lab right after, and I basically got in my car and booked it down to Mount Royal to school. And I think I still like had my medals on underneath. I was like taking off my jacket, and I was like, oh yeah, and like put them away. Like at that point I hadn't really told a lot
nice of people. Flex.
But I mean, I hadn't really told a lot of people, because I didn't feel like I was very good at it. And so I kind of was just like, this is just my side thing. Like, don't worry about it.
So, for anyone who doesn't really know, I was just wondering if you could talk about what kind of mentality it takes to slide down an ice chute at over 100 kilometers an hour.
Yeah. Our sport is so mental. Like, physically, you train as hard as you can to get hundreds of seconds off the start to basically, that's your chance to gain your velocity. And then from there, you're leaking energy. You're just trying to make it across the finish line as fast as possible. But mentally, I never really bargained for how tough mentally. And coming from figure skating, you had to memorize choreography, and it was very much a performing sport for sure. So I'm a game day person. Training is sometimes hard, but a lot of visualization when you're learning a new track as well. Technology has really, really aided this, is that now we have amazing GoPros, and people take GoPros down tracks. So until I can see it in my mind without the GoPro, it's easy to mimic my like game plan while staring at the YouTube GoPro. But like nothing prepares you to learn a new track. You can get notes from your teammate. We track walk. Sometimes in the morning, like we'll track walk at 7:30 and our session's at 9. You basically have a game plan, and you're like, I've never felt like what this feels like before. It's just nothing. You don't know what to expect, and so you really have to rely on your sliding instinct to not panic when you're going down a new track. You're maybe going 110, 115 kilometers an hour, maybe more some places, and you really have to trust that you've done like the mental prep work. And it's just a lot of staying calm and talking. For me personally, it's like talking myself off the ledge a lot for the first few years. I won't lie. I pace a lot in the start house, or I did. I shouldn't say I do now, because I've really worked on it. But like sometimes I would be so nervous I would just pace, and that's how your body kind of like regulates itself. I mean, it's just so crazy. I work with a sports psychologist because it's tough to wrap your mind around for sure. And I'm not like one of those people think that we're those like bungee jumping, skydiving people. Some are, but the ones that really stick around actually are really cerebral and like technical. And that's more me. I'm more like, I don't love to take like risks that are unnecessary. So it definitely is a fine line to walk. And I know that I need to take a little more risk to be a little bit faster, but I need to make sure I have the mental game plan to back that up in order to get there, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And how do you think your Bachelor of Health and Physical Education in Physical Literacy helps that at all? I took a sports psychology course, and I think that kind of gave me a little bit of background on, some of the breathing techniques and meditation and how to recognize even like burnout and all that stuff. I think that gave me a lot of help, but also it's more physical. I would say that it helped me just like know, when I'm working with my strength coach, I can talk a little bit. She doesn't have to bring it down all the way down. She can bring it down. I've taken university anatomy and physiology
By no means am I as smart as her. She has her master's in kinesiology, but I can ask the questions back of like, is this muscle? Is this like, it hurts here. Same when I work with my chiro and physio team, I have a basic understanding of the body and how it works and how it regulates. So I can kind of use that and use it to like understand, oh, it's okay that it hurts there because that's a muscle versus like, something is actually wrong, if that makes sense. It helps ease my anxious mind sometimes too, because I can have the anatomy knowledge to back that up.
No, absolutely. So skeleton athlete Grace Dafoe joining me now on the Unnamed Sports Show. So, you've kind of talked about the different, spots on the Canadian team and stuff. We have the 2022 Beijing Olympics coming up. What do you have your eyes on that at all? What do you need to do to make that a reality for you?
That's such a tough question. Of course, we're always shooting for the next Olympics, but the three top women right now they've all gone to the last games. And so, the realistic mind of mine is like, those three are probably, if nothing goes sideways, going to be the Olympic team in 2022. And they're all amazing. Our Canadian team is so we work together. So, their success at the next games can also bring more funding for us for 2022 to 26. So to me, I'm like, send whoever on whatever races will get us, the results. And we're lucky that we have, a lot of racing circuits to choose from. And we have, so I mean, like, it doesn't mean that I'm not getting experience. I'm probably not ready to be on World Cup quite yet. And if you're in a smaller nation, they kind of rush that because they're just like, well, I get to be on TV. And so bring their sponsors more, more exposure right away versus like, we're kind of working hard behind the scenes on these like lower level circuits. And the pressure isn't quite there as much for me. So yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been aiming for the 2026 games. And just like looking at my development, that's kind of been more realistic. I only made the national team 2 years ago, even though I competed like representing Canada from 2014 to 2019. I was in that provincial level. So really like this is all very new to me still as in going into my second year as a national team athlete. Just learning, what it takes to reach that next level. Like just working with my coach right now and talking about the gaps that need to be closed. And, I finished, I would say about 4 or 5 seconds back from over 2 runs from the top person that won our races. And so, you really need to sit down and be like, well, if I can get those 4 to 5 seconds closed, those 3 are the best in the world. Yeah. So really, I'm very lucky to have these, I mean, all the women, like I said, in front of me are top-notch quality. So just looking at them and what they're doing and closing the gap closer and closer and closer, I know that they're world-class. And I know that with them kind of leading the charge in the Canadian program, that I'm going to have the opportunity to be world-class later on. So it's not a rush. It's very much a marathon. It's despite us being a sprint, it is a marathon of development and recognizing that, even though you want to go to the next games, doesn't always mean it might be best. So of course, I'm ranked 5th in Canada right now. And we have a maximum of 3 spots. We have to qualify those against other nations. So it might be 2, but hopefully it's 3. We're working really hard. And I get to be a part of that on the lower level circuit as well. We need to get a certain number of athletes in the top 60 in order to qualify max spots, say. So we get to be a part of that as well. So, I mean, it's a team effort.
Well, it's a team effort, and then it just benefits and pays off for Canada at the Olympics if we can take home some more gold medals. So take that, my American producer. So, Grace, I want to lighten things up a bit with some fun questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So what's the fastest speed you've ever been clocked at?
134.9 kilometers an hour.
Holy. That's about 40 kilometers more than I'm allowed to drive to work today. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Who is someone that you look up to in either this sport or just in general?
Oh, that's a tough question. There are so many athletes I look up to. Growing up, I would say figure skater, I always looked up to Joanie Rochette, and that goes back to the 2010 Olympics. Mm-hmm. She had just lost her mom and she skated to a medal. To me, I have goosebumps right now just actually saying that. I still remember that moment, and obviously I was deeply ingrained in figure skating at that time. So, that moment was really emotional. Right now, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm going to pump my friend's tires. And if she ever hears this,
do it.
She'll laugh because, it's someone that I knew when I started skeleton. And then we trained together a few years ago, and then she moved over to represent the Swiss team. And now she's actually one of my technical coaches. Her name's Michaela Widmer, and she's been around the sport well before I came into it, but she's the president of our provincial sport organization now. And like I said, she's helping develop athletes through their like private coaching club. So we pay obviously them to have, aside from what I'm allocated through Bobsleigh Canada Skeleton, we kind of also have a private coach on the side, because you want to have people on your team to make you be the best you can be. So I mean, I've looked up to her, and we did get to race actually together a few times, and we roomed together one of my first races in Whistler. So yeah, I mean, there are moments from every Olympic Games I could pick out 4 or 5 athletes. But yeah, I'll keep it there.
Okay. So most embarrassing sports moment, and it doesn't have to be from skeleton, it can be from anything. So myself, I ran into a goalpost head first, trying to save a shot in soccer. I did not save the shot, but I did hit the post with my face.
Okay, I can think of one really good figure skating one. Obviously, we have music that we skate to. And mine wasn't a competitive program. It was like an interpretive program, which is one of the like gold tests. So you don't really do jumps, but it's more like singles ice dance. You interpret music, and I skated to a Queen medley. And as the closing number, you mix the music, was "We Are the Champions," and I am going across the ice. And I hit my toe pick, and it's singing "We Are the Champions," and I was sliding on my stomach I'm pretty sure from honestly blue line to blue line. That definitely sticks out as one of the ones that is haha embarrassing, because we still talk about it. There are a few that oh man, I remember falling on my very last spin before the end position and ending my competitive program, staring down at the ice on my butt, sitting down, just being so defeated.
I figured since you're an athlete that works on ice, there would be a couple there. So, who's the coolest person that you've ever met, or I guess most famous, or anything? Just
the coolest person I've ever.
I mean, it'd be pretty cool to meet John Montgomery, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't I didn't sit down and have a conversation with him. He was kind of one off, but there are some really. I'm involved with Kidsport Calgary, obviously an area here, and we have a lot of really awesome athlete ambassadors. I'm trying to think. There's been a couple events. Okay, yeah, I can think of this one. So Brian Burke does Targets for Kids out here in Calgary, which is a kids. Because when he was working in Calgary, he got deeply involved with Kidsport, and Rob Kerr helped him kind of bring this event to be Kidsport funded. And we all basically go out and shoot clays just south of Calgary. And Brian's obviously an avid hunter, so he brings out all the Flames alumni and athlete ambassadors for Kidsport, and local personalities, we like to call them. I don't like to say celebrities, because I'm not a celebrity. But yeah, I got to meet Brian Burke there, which was I'm a huge hockey fan. And I was I went home, and my dad is also a huge hockey fan. I went home and I was oh my gosh, I stood next to Brian Burke today. That's crazy. So I mean, it's just that sticks out because it's in the last couple of years, but moments like that you're just this is where the skeleton journey has brought me, standing at a table after an event with Brian Burke. And to me, that's just nuts. I'm what alternate reality am I living in?
That's pretty cool. And I know Brian Burke does a lot of really good grassroots work in Calgary and Toronto with a lot of, kids sports organizations, and just great initiatives in general. So what's your favorite track to race on, and why?
This is such a popular question for skeleton.
I know the answer, but my audience doesn't know the answer.
Okay. Well, I mean, and this has changed throughout my career as well. So I will say I don't factor Whistler into the equation at all, because it's a home track. You're always more, it's like playing in a home arena. you're always more at home because you know what to expect. You know the track crew. You know you know it more intimately than tracks you visit. A lot of the European tracks have this aura of just like, we're there, it's snowing, there's Christmas markets, people are drinking beer or Glühwein down in like the lower VIP areas in a non-COVID year. And like these tracks just have like these really cool auras, and people in Europe love sliding. They like have hundreds of people come out to races. It's insane. Like nothing that North America really brings really right now. Koenigsegg, Germany is just like, it's a really interesting place. Hitler's Eagle's Nest is there. So there's a lot of like history, you know, in his reign and that there. And it's also just like stunningly beautiful. You're in the Alps between Austria and Germany, really close to Salzburg. So it's also nice. We spend a lot of time in these really small towns, like remote towns in Europe, I would say. And there's only a few that are close to cities. So Koenigsegg is really about 30 minutes from Salzburg, which is a big city. So it's always nice that you can like go in and shop, and like we walk around the Salzburg Christmas market this time last year, actually, I was there. Yeah, it's just, and it's a really interesting track. It's not one of the faster ones. So I say my fastest speed is like 134.9. There, you know, we're lucky if we hit like 112. It's a lot slower, but it has slower tracks bring different issues of like, you have to be really subtle and you have to know exactly the right moment to steer. And if you miss it, you're slow.
Yeah.
Nothing bad happens, but you get to the bottom and you're like, well, why is that person like 7 seconds ahead of me? Like, I don't know what they're doing. Clearly not, I'm not doing the right thing. But so Koenigsegg brings that, like that part of, and it has this turn called a Kreisel, which means circle in German. And it's basically over 360 degrees. So the track comes out, you come like above it, you go in a full circle and you exit below it. It's like a loop-de-loop of a roller coaster almost. And it's really fun because you go through like 3 pressures. Like, so the way obviously our bodies interact with the sled is like the geometry of the corner, and the G-force hits us and then it releases, then it hits us again and then releases and then hits us again, and then you exit the corner. It's kind of a blind exit on that one. So it's lots of fun.
It's really cool. I love how technical of a sport it is. And like you said, you know, people think you're just jumping on a sled and going down, but the little things like if you don't get this turn properly, you're losing all your speed and that's it.
Yeah, it is. People don't realize that. And we're basically manipulating the pressures of the corners, and you have to know about, you know, physics. And I was never good at physics in school. And suddenly I'm like, well, I'm learning. Maybe if I had been able to apply it to something, because now I'm like, oh, I understand. And we talk about weather, we talk about humidity, how they interact with the ice. There are so many factors.
Okay, so I'm really loving all of the answers that I'm getting to this question. So what's one thing that people may not know about you? So it could be anything, because I'm getting just some random answers and I think it's hilarious.
Man, I'm a pretty open book, I would say. I think just people, they don't know that like a lot of my teammates and a lot of skeleton athletes come from like highly successful careers before sliding. And I think people I always say I'm a self-proclaimed mediocre figure skater that got turned up in the world of skeleton and somehow figured out how to run fast so I could make the national team and slide. But so I think that's always surprising to people because they like think that we're like these elite athletes. But on the other end, I think people don't know like what goes on. You know, I just spent 6 weeks out in Whistler sliding. It wasn't a vacation. I worked full time for a nonprofit, and we're North American wide. My nonprofit that I work for is called Classroom Champions. And so I think people don't know, like in such a niche sport, that there's a level of support, but it doesn't really extend down to the development level that I'm at. You know, it's kind of like those they've identified who's going to medal in the next games and they get supported and they earn that support by all means. But like, they don't know that I have teammates that basically we all work in the community. And then we also volunteer outside of our full-time jobs and sliding. I don't think they know the number of hours that it takes behind our like 1 minute run. You know, and our 4 minutes of fame every 4 years kind of thing. it's truly a grind, and supporting athletes and being an athlete is an every day, every minute endeavor. And we're not as lucky as maybe some of the bigger sports to be able to, you look at some of the bigger sports, freestyle skiing is a really good example. They have a ton of government support because they have a lot of disciplines and we're really strong in it. So they get the luxury to say, be an athlete 24 hours a day, and I have to kind of switch between working 7 hours and doing, it gets crazy. And I don't say I regret my choices at all, but it for sure is a grind.
I had Canadian sprinter Jerome Blake on one of my earlier shows, and he spoke about, the same kind of thing and how it's, you see that Andre DeGrasse and these guys, but not that's just one out of hundreds that are getting all this stuff. So anything that you can do out there, people, to support your local sport and athlete, go ahead and do it. So again, you're not my first Kidsport ambassador I've had on the show.
Really?
No, because Jerome Blake is involved with that in BC here. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with that program? And could you just kind of talk a bit about it?
Yeah. So Kidsport is a nationwide charity, and obviously it's broken up into regions. So if you're interested in learning what your one is, you can look up Kidsport Canada, and it lists out all the regional districts, and find your local one. Find out how you can support them. So Kidsport, obviously they help serve kids and families that necessarily can't afford sport. And it's not high performance sport by any means. It's sometimes recreational soccer. It just helps pay they apply, and obviously they have to go through some checks and balances. And then they get money back to put towards a registration. And I can't speak for everyone. I know Kidsport Calgary works a lot directly with the sport org sometimes, so that the money never even has to go through the families. They just, register through the thing, and they say that they're interested in Kidsport. They get the application, and the money basically goes right through to the sport org from Kidsport. We're very lucky, actually, in Calgary. We also partnered with the Calgary Flames Sport Bank. They work together. So not only do you get registration fees, but you can then get set up to get equipment for your sport, which is really awesome. And people donate, new, used, like good equipment that kids can get. So we're really, really lucky. And how I got involved, I was training at a gym. When I started taking skeleton seriously, I say around 2014, about 8 months before I was racing, I found a strength coach and through a friend, and ended up kind of falling into this awesome community. And there was rugby athletes training there, Canadian, two of my friends that represented Canada in men's and women's, and skeleton athletes, bobsleigh, like all sorts of athletes. And I looked around, and a lot of them were involved with this Kidsport Calgary thing. And they started to talk about how fun these events were and how awesome it was. And then I also started to become more better friends with them. And Michaela is one of those, I say, my mentor. I looked at what she was doing, and I'm like, well, I want to emulate that as a young athlete. So in a roundabout way, I got connected to who was this person who was doing the kind of managing the community ambassador relationship at the time. And I just said, I'm really interested. I got an intro email from an athlete friend, and they're like, you sound like the perfect fit, come on out. And my first event was actually Brian Burke's Targets for Kids. So I've never shot clays before at all. And this is one of the best events that Kidsport Calgary puts on. It is we have a lot of great events, but it's one of the premier events. And so I was nervous because, you kind of got thrown into the fire, and Rob Kerr's auctioning you off suddenly to raise money for Kidsport. And, you're like, oh my gosh, no one wants to bid on me. But anyways, I ended up there, and just ever since, it's become this really awesome way for me to connect with my community. And we also, I get to live out kind of say some of my dreams as well, because we work with the Hitmen. So we got to be the intermission entertainment. We had a Kidsport home opener for the Calgary Hitmen the last couple of years. So it kind of just became this awesome way to work within the community, obviously, and help kids, but then also just it's so fun. They thank us when we leave, thank you for coming. Thanks for donating your time. I'm like, thank you. This is the best. It's just the best. Everyone wins. And so actually then it's morphed into the last few months. My friend Alicia Risling, who's a 2018 bobsled Olympian, and myself got approached by Rob Kerr and the executive director of Kidsport to say, let's start a Kidsport podcast. And I kind of thought I was just going to be on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got an email and it's like, yeah, so you guys are the co-hosts. Here's how we're going to do it. And I was like, I'm not going to lie, a little terrified, but we have Rob Kerr who's producing it. Honestly, like Rob's a great guy. I've gotten to know him a lot working with Kidsport because he does so much within the community in Calgary. And yeah, they basically just trusted us from the get-go, and they set us up with guests, and we're just looking to highlight, community sport and kind of the gift of sport and whatever comes up just in the realm of sport, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a whirlwind. It's only been about 3.5 years since I've become a Kidsport ambassador, but I've loved every second of it.
That's awesome. I'll have to make sure I throw the podcast and all that stuff down in the links. So one thing that's really important right now, could you talk about Fast and Female and what that is and how you got started with that program?
Yeah, so Fast and Female is basically out to empower women and anyone who identifies as a woman to basically be healthy and active. And again, it's not focused on high performance sport. Those are we get them, but that's not who we're trying to reach. Those are the ones that, they understand already the benefits of sport and physical activity. We're trying to reach populations necessarily that don't have a way to be active or don't know, kind of what they just don't, they're a little lost in finding what makes them want to be healthy. And so they bring a lot of athlete ambassadors on. We call them real role models now, not ambassadors, I guess. But they bring us on and we teach them a lot about like what sport has taught us. And, they get to ask us questions like, were you ever scared when, something happened? And a lot of us are very real with that, like about how we've maybe contemplated retiring from our sport or a time when, your personal life when took you away from sport or something like that. Like we're very open. We're open books with these girls. And they're really important. It is also run all over North America, but the headquarters is in the Calgary-Canmore area. Chandra Crawford started it. She's a cross-country skiing Olympian, gold medalist. So she headed it up and she's just been this awesome inspiration. Brought on all these amazing athlete ambassadors, real role models. I should stop saying ambassadors. And they've pivoted now to they've been doing online events the last couple months just to make sure people are home and, not necessarily out maybe in gym class or PE that they have the opportunity, but we just do a lot of events or like a lot of stations normally as well that we like do something that's not something they normally would get exposed to. So like we've had like kickboxing coaches come out, boxing, karate, or like roller derby. Actually, the last one that I went to in person, we had like roller derby. Now we didn't put them all on roller skates, but they got to like run around and emulate the tactics of roller derby and how so to me, it just like opens up, girls and women's minds to learn about what else is out there. And really what it's driven from is the fact that like females drop out of sport at a much higher rate once they hit that 10, 11, 12, 13 range. And so as the role models that were those few that didn't, we're trying to make sure that we are like reducing that dropout rate.
That's really great. And it's important too. So Grace, thank you so much for joining me today. Training looks like it went well, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me at Grace Dafoe on Instagram and Twitter. My website is gracedafoe.ca. Pretty easy to remember. You can find me there. And check out the Face First podcast. That's my brainchild right now.
So you'll be able to find all those links down at the bottom as well. So Grace, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
All right. I want to thank my guest again, Grace Dafoe, for joining me on the Unnamed Sports Show. If you can tell, I have a bit of a soft spot for Canadian athletes who are playing non-stream sports. It's nice to get your more than 4 minutes of fame every 4 years. So anytime that I can shed some spotlight on any of those great athletes, I love to do so. So make sure you stay tuned this week for NBA season that's starting back up. And I'm going to get you caught up with what's happening around the league and the latest news from the Toronto Raptors this week with my guests. So stay tuned for that on the normal regular show of the Unnamed Sports Show, Thursday at 3 p.m. So I want to thank everyone. This has been a presentation of the Sports Talk Line Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. I have been your host, Joshua Griffith, and remember to love sports, all sports.